Hello, and welcome to Tabletop Talks number 3. I am your host for this, Martin Barker, and we're going to be playing through a scenario called Fifth Line of Attack, designed by my good friend Dave Ramsey. Essentially, this scenario is not necessarily designed to be balanced. We've put it together to be a very, very good scenario to be the first time that you perhaps use tanks in a scenario, kind of a way of introducing them. I'm going to play through the entire scenario from beginning to end. I'm going to explain everything in painful detail to make sure that people understand what I'm doing with the tanks, how I'm firing them, how they're moving, how they're interacting with infantry. I'm not going to be focusing much on infantry rules. I will explain what I'm doing, but I won't go into much detail in terms of the rules. But I'm kind of looking forward to playing this through. It looks very interesting. This scenario, Fifth Line of Attack, plus the other scenarios from the Tabletop Talk series can all be downloaded for free if you are a Patreon. Of course, if you're a Patreon, I suppose they're not completely free, but you might only be a Patreon for a very short amount of time, and you would still be able to download all of these 4 scenarios. If you'd rather not spend the money, you're very, very welcome to work out from listening to me right now as I explain the scenario. I'm sure you'll be able to work it out and play the game without the actual scenario card downloaded. So essentially, if we remember that the north in this scenario is straight up, and we can see that here. These are Hungarians, and they are defending, and they're going to set up first, and they have to set up on or east of hex row W. So they can set up in W, and they can set up anywhere to the right of that. And they have we've got 2 infantry squads, a half squad, fairly good leader, a light machine gun, and 2 Panzer IVs. So these are valuable. They're very good weapons. We'll talk a little bit about their capabilities later on. Very, very low sniper number, 2. Actually, that's a very low sniper number for both orders of battle. I think the idea here is that we're focusing on the tanks. Don't want to be too distracted. Although snipers can have a very big impact on tanks. We'll explain that when we get into the scenario. The Russians then enter on the west side, and I haven't got their sniper candidate. I'll have to get him out in a minute. They enter on the west side on turn 1. There are 4.5 turns. So the Russians move first. There'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 turns, and then the Russians will take the 5th turn, and then the game will be over. We don't have to play out the Hungarians' 5th turn. The Russians in this scenario have 3 ways of winning. The first is they win if they capture this building. But by SSR, there are no upper stories. Everything is ground level only. So these 4 hexes, if they are able to control that building, then they win the at game end. They will be the winners. Or they can exit 2 of these Russian tanks here, the TT3s, off hex G5. It has to be that hex. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's right. This hex here. I should put a V in there. I'll do that in a moment. They can exit 2 tanks off there. They win at game end. Well, effectively they'd win immediately, because it would be impossible for the Hungarians to stop them from winning at that point. Or they can do that one, or they can do that one, or they can destroy or immobilize both of the Hungarian tanks. So the Russians win if any of those 3 things situations has been achieved. Anyway, just to check, see if there are any other special rules. So there is one additional special rule. The 2 Hungarian squads may set up deployed. Remember, normally in a small scenario like this, you would only be able to deploy 1 squad, but by special rule we can deploy, in fact, the entire Hungarian infantry force. Environmental conditions are moderate with no wind at start. All of those settings are set in such a way that they are unlikely to have a big impact on the scenario. So let's start talking first about how tanks move. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the two tanks that are in the game. There's the Russian tank, the T-34, I think it's the T-34M42, and we've got the German Mark, it's a Hungarian Mark IV, it's a German tank, of course. And the first thing that we need to understand in order to be able to move them is that they have two states, in motion and not in motion. So this tank is stationary, essentially. It's not moving, so it has to spend movement points in order to move. Now the number of movement points it has is this number here. And this number here for this tank is 14. For this one, it's slightly faster, has 16 movement points. So if this tank is going to move, it would have to start, if it wasn't in motion at the beginning, so 1 to start. And it can move now into S3 or S4, because this is the vehicle covered arc. You see how the tank, you can see the gun there pointing in that direction, is pointing towards these two hexes, the hex line between these two hexes. It can only move into one of those two hexes, and it would cost 1 movement point for the tank to move into one of those hexes. So we can say, right, I'm going to start for 1. Then you can say we're now going to move. In fact, tell you what, I'm going to put a motion counter on it to show that it's actually moving at the moment. So he's spent 1. He's going to move to here for 2. And I'm going to take the motion counter off, actually, because you're not going to be able to see which way it's pointing. It's going to be 3 movement points, 4 movement points, 5 movement points, 6 movement points. Now, if we want to go to 03, we have to turn 1 to the clockwise, okay, which would cost us another movement point. I think that makes it 6. I can't remember now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've turned 1. That's 7. 8 to there. 9 to there. I can turn 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and now I've spent all my points, and I can end that movement phase in motion. I won't have to spend a movement point to start again in the next Hungarian movement phase, or I could have finished a turn earlier, say, right, that's 13 movement points, and I am going to stop with my 14th movement point, and so I stop in that hex. That means I'm going to be easier to hit, but it's also going to be easier for me to hit things if I try to hit things with the gun. So my firepower is more effective, or perhaps a little bit more vulnerable. It obviously depends on whether you're planning to carry on moving in the next movement phase, or if you're hoping to take some shots during the defensive fire phase of the Russian turn, whether or not you're going to want to start in motion or in movement. And that's the basics of it. So you see, it's really very, very simple. Now, moving through orchards also costs 1 movement point. They're easy to move through. The only effect really of orchards is if you've got passengers, which we're not going to talk about today really, but if you were to have passengers, they come off when you go through orchards. You can go over walls and hedges. So for example, if I'm here and I want to go into EE9, I can do, but it costs me 2 movement points. If I want to go over this wall, I can, but it costs me 2 movement points. 1 to move into the hex as normal, and 1 to cross the wall, and in this case to cross the hedge. And that's basically it. That's the basics of the movement. It's very, very straightforward indeed. There are all sorts of things perhaps that we could add. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I might just mention some of them quickly, but not explain them in depth. The first one I will explain actually is that when you turn the tank around like this, so you're moving down a road, okay, so it's 1 movement point to move down a road, but you can go crew exposed. Now your crew become more vulnerable to enemy fire, but it now only costs you half a movement point to move down a road, so it's much, much, much quicker. I should also say that all of the rules that I've mentioned, all of the movement costs that I've mentioned, would be different if this was a different type of vehicle. It's this thing here tells us that these are tracked AFVs. That way they're tracked tanks, and tracked tanks. That's, I've told you the movement points for that. Half tracks would be slightly different. Wheeled vehicles would be different again. Trucks are different again. So really we're only talking about the movement costs for the tanks that are involved in this game. A couple of things to perhaps to mention but not to talk about in depth is you don't have to, it costs one movement point to move from EE6 to DD6, but I can actually spend as many points as I like. I can actually start here, let's say I'm in motion here and I've got 14 points, I can say I'm going to spend 6 points moving into DD6. So I could move to there and I could say that's 6, 7, 8, and I could even say 13 and stop for 14. So there are reasons, and I'm not going to go into them now, why you might want to do that. Essentially to try and avoid being a very long time in the line of sight of a dangerous weapon is the most common reason. The other thing you can do is you can bypass, like infantry. Now infantry can move into DD5 and bypass the building, can't it? And it's kind of quite cheap for infant movement factors wise for infantry to do that. Vehicles, it's a bit more expensive. We could move into DD5 in bypass of this hex side, and it would cost us double the normal movement points. In this case, it would cost us 2 to move into there. And we can move into CC6 for 3, and we could then bypass BB5 for 5. The rule is that you on the normal boards, you need to be able to place a counter on its edge, and if there is enough gap between the hex side and the building, then there's enough space there for the vehicle to bypass. And I think that here this would clearly be bypassable. I think something like this hex side here, BB1 here, that probably be a little bit tight for bypassing. And the only other rule that perhaps I should mention is that you can get extra movement points. You have to roll a dice, and there's a danger that you'll immobilise your vehicle. So I'm not going to talk about that a great deal at the moment, but that's something else that may crop up. If it crops up in the game, I'll talk about it in more depth. Buildings, you can move into them. There's a risk of bogging. When you go into a building, there is also a risk of falling into the cellar. In this game, I think it's very unlikely we'll try and move in tanks into buildings, but I think there's a significant chance that we might try to get them through woods. And this is really interesting because when you move into woods, there are two ways to do it. You can use all of your movement factors, in which case they take a normal bog check to move into that hex, but they only move into the woods, and then they have to try to move out the next time they move out, and you create a trail break so subsequent tanks can move through more safely. That's a possibility that the Russians will want to do that, perhaps to, if the Hungarian tanks are all in the north, it might be that they try to push off by going through the woods. That's a perfectly viable possibility for them. Okay, that essentially is movement, or at least all of the movement that I'm going to talk about today. The next thing that I want to talk about is the machine guns on these vehicles. So here we have 2 factors here, 3 and 5. I think similar on the Russian one, we've got 2 and 4. When there are only 2, it is this is a bow machine gun, so this is attached to the turret and has to fire in the same direction that the gun is pointing. And the second one is the coaxial machine. Sorry, I'm going to start that again. The first one, the 3, is a bow machine gun, and that has to fire in the direction of the vehicle covered arc because it's attached to the vehicle, if you like. The second one is the coaxial machine gun, and that's attached to the turret, so the turret can potentially turn in a different direction, like this. So in this instance, the coaxial machine gun, the 5-fire packed one, could fire in this direction, and the 3-fire one, the bow machine gun, could fire in this direction. If they're firing at something that they can both fire at, they can fire together, so they can form sort of a fire group, if you like. And that's, I was trying to be been a bit of a mess with this. So let's just equalize this so it looks a bit more easy to understand. Okay, so those are the machine guns. Now these are just basically exactly the same as infantry fire machine guns. They don't cower, I suppose, is one distinction. They can't be led by a leader. Infantry leaders can only kind of command infantry units. Okay, so these numbers here. Let's talk about the turret. This is a fast traverse turret. You notice that it's round. This tells us that this vehicle can turn its gun and its coaxial machine gun in a direction other than the direction that the vehicle is pointing by moving the turret. And we'll talk about what it costs later. Over here we've got a slow traverse, so this is a little bit more costly in terms of the to-hit roll when the Russian tank turns to fire at a target outside its covered arc. The excuse me. Some vehicles will not have a turret at all, and then the main armament and any they wouldn't have a coaxial machine gun, but any machine guns and any main armament would only be able to fire within the vehicle covered arc if there was no turret. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the gun. So this German tank has a 75L, the German gun, the 75L. The Russians have the 76L. If I just bring up the fire tables, the German 75L has a to kill number of 17. So if they achieve a hit, we'll talk about how it achieves a hit a bit later, it then compares the to kill number of 17 against the armour factor of the target that it's hit. The Russian 76L has a 13 penetration factor. Again, could be compared against the armour of the target that it hits. So if we just take an example here, you've got these two tanks facing off. They are both in each other's covered arc. This tank is going to fire, and let's say he scores a hit. We know that he needs to roll less than or equal to a 17, but we are going to add 11 to the dice roll. So to kill dice roll, 6, 7. So it's a 6 add 11 is 17. That would actually equal the to kill number. So that's and it equals would have an effect. We'll talk perhaps a little bit about the effect when we get into the game, and we'll see what happens. So you can see that this is the front armour of this tank is the 11. The 6 is the front armour of the Mark IV. As they're facing each other, they're going to be hitting each other's best armour all the time. Always going to be hitting the front armour. The second number is the side and rear armour. So with the Mark IV, it's a 3. With the T34, it's a 6. If it's hit in the rear covered arc facing, then it's always 1 less than the side. So if you hit the rear target facing of the T34, the armour protection is only a 5, and perhaps we have a situation like this, for example. It's now it's hitting the T34 in the rear, and it's only got an armour factor of protection 5 against the 17. You can see it'd be much more likely that the T34, having scored a hit, would destroy this tank. There are other aspects. I'm not sure how much detail I want to go into right now, but this square box, for example, around the side means that the armour is actually somewhat better if this vehicle is hitting the turret. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later, because we have to talk first about where hits happen, because hits when you hit a vehicle, it can hit it in different places, and we need to talk about that in perhaps more detail. So I think we know what the main armament is, we know what the machine guns are, we know what the armour is, and we know what the movement factors are. We've also got, both vehicles have a 1 in a box. That's a rate of fire number. So you remember when you do a to hit, a 4 is nice and low, but it would have, that would be its last shot. It wouldn't be able to. It doesn't keep rate of fire. Only keeps rate of fire if the coloured dice roll is a 1 or less. So we'll get into the game shortly, and we'll hopefully see that in operation. Okay, I'm going to set up the Hungarians, I beg your pardon, sorry. So we obviously need to protect this building. We need to be able to get all of the infantry as the Hungarians back into this building before the end game. So they're not going to be very far away from that building. I think we'll put them here with the hope of perhaps giving a little bit of protection to the tanks and being able to perhaps take some shots at any infantry that move too quickly. We'll put the light machine gun with the leader. We'll put this guy in that building to prevent the Russians from getting luckily getting a little half squad in there, and if that building is empty, it would automatically become controlled by the Russians. This prevents that from being automatic. Right, the tanks. So I think one of the tanks will do very, very well in here. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk about later on when we start doing to hits, and we're going to go through those in detail when we start firing at each other, is that when you roll a to hit dice roll, you have to see whether 6 would hit, but also you look at the whether it hits the hull or the turret. Okay, so there are two possible targets. If the kind of red number is, or the coloured dice is the same as or bigger, then the vehicle has been hit in the turret. Okay. If the white number is higher than the coloured number dice, then the tank has been hit in the turret. White over red, hit in the head. That's how I remember it, particularly when I first got started. Now, the reason I put this tank here is because it's surrounded by a stone wall. If an anti-tank shell hits a stone wall hits the hull of a tank, then it has no effect on the tank whatsoever. Essentially, it's hull down, its hull is protected, and so you have to get that turret hit to hit a tank that's in a position like that. So I'm going to put it in there. However, I don't want this tank to get kind of swarmed. I need the other tank to be in a position where it's going to protect this from being perhaps the Russians coming around from the north. So we're going to put this tank here. Okay, so that's my setup. Now, because the Russians start off board, there are two things that the Russians can do, the Hungarians can do, I beg your pardon. One is they can conceal everything. So let's conceal that. Let's conceal that. Let's conceal these. Let's conceal this guy here. Basically everything. And that leaves us with two counters that are dummy counters. Now, at the moment, if I put them, I can put them in wherever I like. And this looks like I've got an infantry unit there, and this might confuse the Russians. They might be thinking, "Oh, I don't know is it a real infantry unit? Is that a dummy? Is it a half squad? Is it a full squad?" They wouldn't necessarily know. But when you have dummies like this and you've got vehicles, it's a very good idea to make them look like tanks. Okay, so I've changed these to the larger concealment counters. So the Russians will not know where my tanks are. Now, you might say it looks really obvious because you can see a bit of green on this. You know that these are real tanks and that this is a dummy. But actually, if I was playing against another opponent, because I'm logged in with my password, it wouldn't be very obvious. It wouldn't be obvious at all. Let's put him down here to protect the south. Okay, so this is where we are at our weakest, and we're kind of hoping really that the Russians head to the north, because this is our weakest area, and we want them to go into our strongest area, and they don't know which of these is a dummy tank. They know there's a real tank, but they know there are two real tanks and one dummy, but they won't know which is which. Russians are going to make a pretty good guess that this is a full squad with a light machine gun and an 8-1 leader, and they could do a little bit of counting to realise that we haven't deployed any squads, so they're going to know that one of these is a half squad and one of them is a squad. And the other thing that we can do, because the Russians are coming from off board is we can bore sight hexes. So when you fire with a gun, and of course tanks have a gun, so the rules for guns apply to tanks. One of the things that you can do is place and then it's basically choose a hex that you know that your big guns can see, and you can say that they are bore sighted. Okay, so if I flip that, I can label it. So I can label it. I don't know, tank A, bore sighted. If you were playing on boards, you would just secretly record the location of this. So we've got a label here. That's tank A. Okay. Now what that means is that if you fire this tank at a target in that hex, it's much more likely to be a hit. It subtracts 2 from the to hit dice roll. Now I'm going to hit that, but we can all see it. Okay. I also clone it, and I am going to put this one down here. So imagining perhaps that that they might come that way. Okay. You can do this also with medium machine guns, heavy machine guns, ordnance, all ordnance, may not learn the ordnance where you have an ordnance on the tanks. So we're set up and we're ready to go. So let's see what the Russians are going to do. Okay, so we're now going to do the Russian setup. I'll just move this over a little bit because we need some room to set these guys up off board. I'm going to bring all of the guys in slightly different ways because I want you to see how the infantry can work with tanks in different ways. So for the first tank is going to come on with a squad and a leader, and they're going to come on in armoured assault. Now that means that they're actually going to move kind of like together. So this is a very special rule. Armoured assault, a tank can move with infantry. You have to keep track of the movement points, movement factors of both, but because the infantry is so much slower in this example, we'll only have to really worry about the movement factors of the infantry. The tank and the infantry will move together until the infantry have exhausted their movement factors, and that will be the end of the movement phase. The tank will be able to go no further, even though he could have moved much further. Essentially, they're moving along together. The second tank is going to come on with the infantry as riders. Now, this scenario takes place in 1943. Correct, 1943. Russians can use tanks, can put a squad, basically one squad. I think it's 14 portage points. A squad is 10. 14 portage points on a tank from 1942. Before that, they can't. Riders are not allowed by the rules. And the most other nationalities, in fact, I believe all other nationalities, can bring units on tanks from 1943. There is some limitations on exactly which vehicles can do this, but in this scenario, the tanks can do it. So in actual fact, this tank is going to be able to move its full 16 movement points. Wherever it goes, the infantry will be on board it. Now, I'm bringing you on over there because he's not going to get any particular advantage from... Yeah, he's going to be moving without using the benefit of the road. Now, because tanks have to... Now, also, we don't want to go through the orchards because then the infantry get kind of knocked off, they have to take a morale check, a bale roll. So we're going to avoid doing that. We're not going to fuss about that rule. Now, this guy here, this tank here is actually going to come on open topped. Now, I mentioned that this is much more dangerous, but it means that this tank can move much further. And we're going to take the chance that it doesn't look like the Germans are particularly set up, sorry, the Hungarians are particularly set up to fire at these guys. So they're going to go crew exposed, which means they're going to be able to move further down this road. Okay, and essentially we're set up. So all of the guys can come on concealed. I'll explain the rules of all the different things that we're doing when we start to do it. Now, when you come on from off board, everything can be concealed. It's removed by the Hungarian player showing a real unit with a line of sight, and as soon as the Hungarian proves that he's got a line of sight to something with a real unit, the unit that was moving, the Russian unit, will lose its concealment. But we have a dummy. So, for example, if we moved a Russian unit in front of this dummy, well, the Hungarian player would not probably wouldn't be able to show a real unit, and therefore the Russians wouldn't lose their concealment. However, the Hungarian unit only has to temporarily reveal itself to prove it's a real unit. It can then become concealed again. It obviously gives the Russians some intelligence, but it doesn't make their units more vulnerable to fire. And that is the Russians set up, ready to go. Okay, we're going to start turn one, the Allied turn one. And the first thing that we are going to need to do is roll for weather. There's no change, only a 12 would really, or a double one would have any impact on the game. There are going to be no rally actions for either side. There is going to be no prep fire because, of course, the Russians are going to be moving straight away. And so we are in the movement phase. Okay, so this unit here is going to declare armoured assault. And I should just say, I will describe things in more detail the first time that they kind of happen, because there are lots of things that I haven't explained. But as we start to take shots and things start to move, explain those things in copious detail. So this infantry and this tank are declaring armoured assault. Notice there is a leader in there, so these are going to be able to move 6 hexes. If they CX, they can move 8 hexes, and if they're going down a road, they'll get road bonus. So potentially these guys can move 16 hexes. So we go 1. Sorry, not 16 hexes. What am I talking about? I beg your pardon. They're going to be able to move 9 hexes if they stay on the road, 8 if they don't. 1 to there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, there is a possibility, I don't know for sure, but there is certainly a possibility that the, so we're in Q5 here. I don't seem to be able to place them in Q5. There we are. This tank might just have a line of sight. Now, I'm not sure. So the Hungarians are going to declare a line of sight check. So they're revealing that tank. It's only temporary, but they're revealing it. And they draw a line to Q5, which is where we are. And as you can see, that misses this building. So in actual fact, that is a line of sight. The Russians lose concealment immediately. The Hungarians maintain concealment unless they choose to fire, which they may well do, actually. So we've got the bow machine gun will not be able to fire. The bow machine gun, if it fires, will just fire into the wall, but it could fire the coaxial machine gun. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to need to pause here and just double check on the range. Yes, sorry, I didn't want to say something wrong. I was actually right. The coaxial machine gun has a range of 12 hexes, so this shot is well within its range. The bow machine gun would only have a range of 8, which would make this a kind of long range, or out of its normal range. So we're going to fire those coaxial machine guns. It's going to be 4 firepower. There's going to be a +1 because of the hindrance. There's going to be a +1 because the tank gives them some protection, so it's +2. It's also going to be -1 because they are non-assault moving. So the net shot is a 4 + 1. And we have rolled 6, 7, and I need to get the charts up, don't I? 7 on a 4. 7 on a 4 is a pin task check. So the leader rolls a 3 and passes very safely, and the squad also passes very safely. These are very, very good morale units. Now, the tank needs to decide whether it wants to fire at this tank. Now, if it was going to take that shot, it would be +1 because this tank is buttoned up. I could have started it crew exposed, but I've started it buttoned up, so it's +1 for buttoned up, +1 hindrance, +2 because it's in motion, and plus, I'm going to have to, it might probably make sense actually if I show you these, ordnance to hit. Defensive first fire versus moving target less than or equal to 1 movement factors is case J, that's the +2, plus an additional 2. So because I've only seen it for that short amount of time, it's going to be +1, +2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to be +6. And at this hex range it would be a 9 to hit, so I'm adding 6. It's a very, very low chance that this tank is going to get a hit. However, if we have a look on the back of this tank, we find out that it has a crew survival of 6. It has smoke dispensers, which are smoke you can place in your own hex. It has can fire smoke. But in 1943, see what it says A5 with a 2 above upper script, and then a 4 with a little 3. That means that in 1943, on a 4, this tank has APCR. So you can see it's actually quite unlikely that it has any APCR at all. APCR is a more effective anti-tank weapon. Because those two numbers are so similar, he's going to fire APCR. Let me just show you how this works then. So ordnance to hit, 7 to 12 hexes. It is a 9 base. We've already identified that we need to add 6, so we need a 3 to hit. We're declaring APCR, and that which is a more effective type of anti-tank weapon. So let's see if we get a hit to hit. No, and this vehicle now no longer has any APCR, so we can usually put a counter on it, or sometimes we label it with this. So no, let's just call it AP. That's not armor superiority, that's APCR. So we fired at that hex, and we've done no real damage. So they can continue to move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 to there. Now we've been revealed, but there doesn't seem to be anything to fire at it. This guy here could potentially fire. So the Russians would probably be more cautious if we were in a proper game, but obviously, he can't do anything because of the way we're playing. Okay, now this infantry unit is going to be able to advance to T6 or T5 next turn, but and this vehicle here is still in motion. I could stop him. There's no reason why I can't, because he's only spent 9 movement points, so he could, but we're going to leave him in motion. Right, now this guy is carrying somebody, and he's crew exposed. Now he is going to want to avoid Q5, which he knows is a hex that potentially the Russians can see and fire at. There's also residual in there, isn't there? 4 went down to 2, reduced by 1 because of the hindrance. So actually there's 1 residual in that hex. So he has to move into here first off board, because they were along that road kind of like lining up to come in. So that's a half movement factor because he's crew exposed. 1 onto there. 1.5, 2. 3. 3.5. Can he bypass that hex? For 5.5. 6.5. Now he can do a free line of sight check. Okay, so can he see him? He certainly can't see him there. That's a free line of sight check. So if you've got the concealment counter on, you can take that line of sight check, no problem. I can't remember what it was now. 1, 2, 3, 3.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5 to there. You can do another free line of sight check, and he can see him there. So these guys all lose concealment. They spent 7.5. This time he decides not to take a shot. 7.5. Now I know I need 5 movement points in this hex, so he's going to button up. You can do that anytime you want. You can button up, like you can toggle to buttoned up or cruise phase anytime you like, but you can only do it once in a movement phase. So for example, you can't unbutton in order to move down the road and then button up when you move off the road. You can only change it once during the movement phase. Right, I want to be in here, and I have got 16 movement. I want 5 movement factors left when I move into that hex. You'll see why in a moment. So I'm going to spend 11 to move into there, so up to 11. So I'm spending whatever the difference is between 7.5, whatever I'd spent, and 11. I'm spending that to move into there. I need to spend 1, but I'm going to spend more. I've got 5 movement points left. One of those movement points is to stop, so that's 12. And then these guys are going to get off. And they get off, and it costs 1/4 of the tank's movement, which is 4. So this tank is stopped. The dude's off the tank. And there we are. That's where they got to. Okay, now this tank here isn't going to be able to do nearly such clever things because it's not on the road, but it's also carrying these guys. Let's see how far they can get. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, because we have to pay an extra one because there's already a vehicle in there. That looks really, really dangerous, doesn't it? Yeah, let's try it. 12 to there. And they are going to stop for 1. Now these guys, and they're going to delay for the last few movement points. Now this is the reason that this is really dangerous, because this guy can take a line of sight check, so they can declare a real unit there. See if he can see him. No, that I think that I have to zoom in, but I think that clips the building. It does. It does indeed clip the building. Okay, so yeah, that unit cannot see the tank, so they can maintain their concealment. Now, because we'd spent at that point more than 11 points, it's not possible for this vehicle to stop and for the infantry to get off. Essentially, they're stuck on board. Okay, so we've now done the movement phase, so let's look at the next phase. Now it's defensive final fire. Now, my suspicion is that the Hungarians can see nothing. If that unit can't see this hex, then this tank here definitely can't. So there's no defensive fire. There is also no advancing fire. Let's look at the route phase. There's obviously going to be no routes. We obviously should have taken this off and removed the move counters. And we are now in the advanced phase. So several units can advance. So this unit is now on the ground, so he can advance. Let's put him into that building, perhaps. The unit that's on this tank cannot advance, and he cannot advance because this tank didn't, there wasn't enough movement points for him to get off. He's essentially stuck on the tank. The leader can move, so let's do that. I'm obviously not moving him to there. I'm just trying to put them into a neat stack without the tank, and we will move him into. Let's move it into this hex. Okay, so at the end of the advanced phase, there's close combat and there is concealment growth. Okay, there is a unit here that potentially could regain concealment. He's in the open, but no Hungarians can see him. So he gets to roll for it. So the leader goes first, and the leader rolls 1 dice, and he has to roll less than a 6, but you've got to add the number of people that are drawn on his counter. So he adds a 1, and he's CX. I think you have to add 1 for that as well. So he's rolled a 6, 7, 8. It's a final 8. He hasn't gained concealment. The unit beneath him, he can roll for it as well, and he has rolled a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the CX. Actually, he is able to gain concealment. Interestingly, had the leader gained concealment, he would have been able to use his leadership modifier to help the squad to gain it. Okay, so here we go. Obviously, that machine gun would be concealed as well, but the leader isn't. Okay, and that is the end of the Russian turn 1. Okay, here we are at the beginning of Allied turn 2. Going to do the ordinary things first. We need to roll for the wind. We haven't rolled a 12, so there's no change. We need to get this in. We're going to try and use this properly because we keep forgetting to use this. Okay, so no wind, no rally actions for the Allies, no rally actions for the Hungarians. Also no prep fire. Obviously the Russians can hardly see the Hungarians at the moment, so we're going to move straight to movement. Now we're not going for optimum. We're simply going to try and sort of illustrate lots and lots of the rules. I'm going to begin by moving this tank that's already in motion. It's going to be able to move straight off. It doesn't have to pay 1 to start, so it's going to move into this hex here. Because it is buttoned up, it costs 1 movement point normally to move into T6. It will cost an additional 1 because there is a friendly tank in that hex, so it's going to cost 2 movement points to move into there, and it is going to move into here for 3. Right, I'm just writing down number 3, so I remember how many movement points I spent, because this may take a little bit of time now to resolve. So obviously we all know that that's a ball-sighted hex. The Allies wouldn't do in a normal game. The Hungarians are going to declare a shot. They've essentially got 3 choices of what they fire. They can fire high explosive, which is actually unlikely to be very effective against a reasonably well armoured tank like the T-34. They can fire anti-tank, which has a reasonable chance of being effective. And this tank also is armed with special ammunition. You can see we've got this this number here, this index number here, that refers to the year. It's 1943. And it is 19 for the scenarios in 1943, which means that this has a special type of ammunition, APCR, on a 4 or less on the to hit roll, and that's a more effective type of anti-tank round, albeit relatively unlikely to hit. So we're going to try to fire APCR first. As you can see, it's actually quite unlikely. It's the most likely we don't have any on board, but it's kind of almost like a free shot. So let's see what this shot is going to be like. So we want the ordnance to hit. So it's within 6 hex range. So vehicle type, target type, we need a 10 to hit. Firer-based hit determination die roll modifiers. So if we're looking at the firer, we're not firing outside our covered arc. It's not our advancing fire phase. It's not bounding fire, because that can only happen in your own movement phase. All of these, we can feel free to read through them, but none of these are going to apply. Buttoned up, well, we went crew exposed just a moment ago. We're obviously not CX, we're not overstacked, not encircled. There's all sorts of things that we're not. So there are no modifiers. So at the moment, it's a 10 to hit. Roll a 10 or less, and it's a hit, albeit because it's APCR, we won't have a round if we roll anything higher than 4. But there are going to be target-based hit determination die roll modifiers. Against a moving target, that's +2. Defensive, so that obviously applies because what we're firing at is moving. Defensive first fire versus a moving vehicular target with between 1.5 and 3 movement in the firer's line of sight. That doesn't apply because we've actually had less time, less movement points have been spent in our line of sight. But this one does apply. Defensive first fire versus a moving vehicular target with less than or equal to 1 movement point spent in the firer's line of sight. He has spent 1 movement point in our line of sight, so we have to add this +2 as well. None of the others are likely to apply. The point blank one is interesting. When both vehicles are stopped, you can have this 1 hex range and 2 hex range away, but we also have this bore sighted target location. That's a -2. So we've got +2 there, +2 there, -2 there. Target acquired, no hazardous movement. Target size modifier, that's worth a double check. I don't believe these Russian tanks are large, no, so they have sort of red circles around their armour number. If they're very large, makes them slightly easier to hit, or they could be small target and they could be more difficult to hit, but we don't have that modifier here. So essentially an 8 or less hits. It's 10 +2, so we're all out to hit. Okay, so that would be a hit, but it isn't because we don't have APCR, so we now would label this no APCR, and it's essentially a free shot. Had we rolled a double 6, it would have malfunctioned the gun, but other than a double 6, it is essentially like a kind of a free shot. We're now going to fire normal anti-tank. It's the same to hit. Oops. Okay, so we rolled a 7. White over red, hit in the head, so we know that this has hit this tank in the turret. The front turret armour is 11. Okay, in fact, all of the front armour is an 11 on this tank. So let's have a look at the to kill on this table, vehicle to kill table. This gun is a 75L. 75L is here. That has a kill number of 17. Alright, it is greater than 65 and it's a range of between 3 and 6, so there are no changes to the to kill number based on the range. You'll notice that the number becomes better if it's adjacent, if it's just 1 hex away. The weapon, the shells become less effective at higher ranges. So we have a 17 to kill, but we need to add 11 to the armour. So this is the to kill roll. 10, if we add 11 to that, it's 21. That's clearly above the to kill. So that failed to have a big impact. Okay, but they now have an acquisition on that tank. It's not cumulative with the bore sighted location, which actually I should reveal now. It's not cumulative, but we can leave the bore sighted thing where it is, of course, because it has to stay where it is. But if the tank continues to move, we can follow it with the with this, like that, basically. Okay, so we've now spent 4 movement points. Now we have the option of intensive fire. Now, intensive fire, if we again look back here, ordnance to hit. Intensive fire is +2 to hit, but it also worsens our breakdown number by 2, so our breakdown number is now 10, not 12. So this is interesting. So now this tank has been in our line of sight for more than 1 but less than 3, so we've got +1 for that, another 2 because it's in motion, so we're +3, another 2 for intensive fire, +4 +5, but we've seen it, we've got the acquisition, so it's +4, so the to hit now is 10 +4. Okay, 4 plus 4 it's a hit, isn't it? A 4 plus 4 is obviously a hit, 8, and this time it is in the hull. Okay, makes no difference to the armour. The armour does vary sometimes between the turret and the hull on some tanks. In fact, it does on the Hungarian tanks, but it could affect what happens to the tank if it's an effective shot. So we've essentially this is the same. This is 17 plus 11 to kill. 6 plus 11 is 17, which means it equals the to kill number. Let's have a look at the vehicle destruction table here. If it equals the final effects die roll, which 17 equals the to kill number, then it's either an immobilize or a shock. Okay. Now the immobilize if it's a hull hit, which it was, and the shock is if it is a turret hit. Well, if we get a shock later, we'll go through that. But basically, so if I might explain this term a bit better. Less than the to kill number obviously eliminates the tank. Less than half of the final to kill number means it's a burning wreck. So if it's eliminated, there's a chance for the crew to get out. If it's a burning wreck, there isn't, and it creates smoke and other effects on play. The shock result is that they button up, stop the tank. We'll show you that if it happens. But this vehicle is now immobile. It stops. I'll leave that on because that's actually a 2 now, isn't it? Okay, flip that. So let's find an immobile counter. Now, when a tank is hit and becomes immobile, the crew have to take a morale check. The Russian tank crews are always 8 morale, so that's a fail. So when they fail, they do a little thing called getting out. So the Russian half squad crew. I know it looks like their morale is a 7, but when they're in the vehicle, they have this 8. It's always the equivalent of the best Russian, squad of that nationality, and of course, it's that's an 8 morale. So they jump out. Okay, terrific. That tank isn't going to go any further. Potentially, that crew could get back in and carry on manning the gun. Okay, and had they not failed the morale check, they would have stayed in, and they could have carried on firing the gun perhaps effectively. But it is worth pointing out now that this tank has not fired its coaxial machine gun, but it has fired its main armament, and that means that this tank cannot fire its main armament again, and that's kind of significant, really, isn't it? So where are we going to go now? Okay, next tank up is going to be this one. Okay, right, so we know this tank can't fire its gun, but it has got machine guns. We're going to start for 1. We're going here for 2. Obviously, they can see us. The machine guns going to fire now. So we've got machine guns on this tank. They can fire. Now we know that this is going to be a 4. Now it's not affected by the immobile tank in V6. Normally that would provide a hindrance, but because this tank, we're still in the movement phase where that tank originally moved there, that hindrance doesn't exist. That hindrance only comes into effect after advancing fire. Okay, so it's going to be a 4, and no hindrances. It's a 4 flat, I believe. So we don't get the movement in the open thing. I think it's basically when you're going along the top of the tank like that, it's basically an even shot. So 4 flat, 5, 6, 7, 8 on a 4 is no effect. So the tank can continue. So it's a 1 to start 2, 3, 4. Oh, this is a mess. 5 to there. Now this tank can see it, also this infantry can see it. Now I could fire at the infantry with this machine gun, but I'm a little bit conscious of the danger of the Russian tanks simply waltzing off the board here. This unit here can, if a tank moves down this road, an enemy tank, because the tank will be in a road with buildings on both sides. This unit here will be able to do something called street fighting, which is quite an effective way of attacking tanks. They're particularly vulnerable when they're sort of going down a road with buildings on both sides. So I don't really want to fire this guy. And actually thinking about it now from a sort of more tactical point of view, it would have been good to have this squad here for the same reason. He would be able to make it more dangerous if the Russians came down this road. And indeed, this unit here, by being here, would also have that sort of street fighting capability if the Russians simply tried to race off the board. So I think it's probably a mistake to leave these Hungarian units where they are. But that's why this unit here is not going to fire. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to there. We're going straight into the hex. 6 to there. And we're going to go straight in. 6, it's going to cost us 7 to move over the wall, 8 to move into the hex, and another one because there's already a vehicle there. So we've spent 9 points. Now, this is a main armament actually also fired the coaxial machine gun, haven't we? Now we're going to turn the turret covered arc like that, and basically if there are men on board and the turret turns, they all have to bail out. Now this is risky, but it is a way of getting infantry into an enemy controlled hex with enemy units during the movement phase, which isn't something infantry can normally do. They can only normally advance in, unless they're human waving and stuff like that, as we looked at in the last video. Now, when you bail out, it is a morale check. They pass it, which means that they are now in that hex, and they have survived. Now, the Hungarians can fire at them. Now, they fired the one machine gun, but they haven't fired the bow machine gun. So we're going to fire the bow machine gun at them. I guess that's a 3. Trebled, it's an 8, isn't it? So 8. So that was meant to be on the IFT roll. That's fine. So 4 on an 8 is a 2 morale check, and 6, 7, 8, 9. So they're broken in that hex. But interesting, that cannot now fire out. Nothing can fire out of that hex now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the tank is going to continue. 10, 11 into there. We're going to turn the turret covered arc back. You can turn that every time, basically, freely. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and we're going to turn the turret covered arc like that, and we are going to stop there. Now, it's an interesting choice, some interesting choices here. So it's used all its movement. It's got a shot to the rear of this tank. This tank is not in motion, that's not in motion, so it's going to be a -2 for the range. Actually, do you know what? We're also going to go crew exposed as we stop. Okay, because we can always do that once during the movement phase. Crew exposed. So essentially, if I choose to take a shot with this Russian unit now, it will be +4 because it's moving. It's going to be +2 because of the type of turret that it has. So that's +4. But we can subtract 2 from that. So it's actually at an 8 to hit. Now, the rear of these tanks are much more vulnerable than the front. So the Russian has a number of choices. I mean, it realistically could be hit and killed here. It doesn't. We don't at the moment. Of course, the Russians haven't declared the shot, but the Russians could not take the shot and wait, so that they gain acquisition by firing in the advancing fire phase, or they could take the shot now and maybe take out Hungarian tanks straight off. Various things that the Hungarians can do. One, they can go into motion. That will make it much, much harder to hit. And essentially the way that works is that for every movement point that tank has been able, the Hungarian tank has been able to watch the Russian tank move, it can add them up, and as long as it's seen it for one, it rolls a dice. If it rolls less than the number, less or equal to the number of movement points that it's been watching it for, then it goes into motion. Now it has been watching this Russian tank for much more than 6 movement points, so it's guaranteed that if it wants to, this tank can go into motion, and it can be repositioned as well. So it could be turned as a part of the going into motion. It can be turned around and it could be facing the tank, showing off perhaps its best armour. So it's absolutely certain that it could do that and make it much, much more difficult to hit, because it would be +2 to hit a moving target, and another plus, and you're also losing the range one, because you only get the -2 range if both of the vehicles are at that moment stopped. So that would mean that it would be so the hit would be +2 for moving, +2 for the type of turret that it's got, another +2 because the target is moving, so it'd be +6. So then the Russian would only hit on a kind of a 4 or something like that. Alternatively, the Hungarian could try to fire first, and that's plausible. Because what you'd do is you'd be looking really to see who has the lowest number of firer die roll modifiers, who's got the lowest die, and that person gets to actually kind of like take the shot first. So if the Russians declare this shot, the Hungarians could declare a gun duel, and then you have to work out who kind of like fires first. I think the trick would be to work out, is this tank likely to destroy this tank? The Russian tank, if it fires, because it's likely to hit, is it likely to destroy the Hungarian tank? Now, it is 1943. You see, they got APCR on a 5, a little bit better than the Hungarians had. They got the 76L. So I think the first trick would be to have a look at the 76L. And it's the Russian 76L, which is the 13 to kill. Okay. Well, the rear armour on this tank is only, in fact, it's only 2, because you subtract 1 if it's so essentially that 3 is for the sides. It's always 1 less at the back, so the rear armour of this tank is only a 2. It'll go back up to a 3. It goes up to a it'll be a 3 if the turret's hit, because that box around that means that the turret is superior in the side and rear of this. So you're just going up to the next level. So okay, it's very likely this tank will hit this tank and destroy it. So I think it's going to go into motion. Okay, so we can put it in motion. That's easily done. Now, where do we want it pointing? I guess what we really want to do is get out of there. So if we just get rid of all this for a moment, pointing the way that he is, there's no hex he can move to where the Russian won't be able to see him, but he'll be behind that wall, so he'll be much safer. Okay, so they're just going to go into motion like that. So he's stopped, he's in motion. Okay, it is now. We're now going to see what these guys are going to do. Okay, this guy here really wants to get into close combat there. So he's going to go 1, 2, 3. All these machine guns are fired, and anyway, this tank cannot fire out because there's infantry in the hex. And we'll go to wherever we go, it's a bit dodgy. We'll go to there. Okay, no, we go to him. Here. No, that gives him a clear shot, doesn't it? Whereas here, he's got the wall. I think we're better off here. Okay, so it moves 1, 2, 3, 4 to there. This tank could fire, but now its shots are much less likely to be effective because it's in motion. He's going to take a shot though. It's going to be a 2 minus 2. 5 on a 2 is a normal morale check. He passes. He doesn't just pass though, because on double 1, it's of course heat of battle. So on the heat of battle, let's see if I can even find the chart for that. Yes, here we go. Okay, so heat of battle. We'll roll 2 dice. Are we elite? We are elite. So when we roll 2 dice, we are going to subtract 1. Broken in experience, French partisan, Russian +2. So effectively, we're going to add 1 to the dice. Okay, let's roll them and add 1. We've got an 11. That's interesting. So an 11 is berserk. So this Russian unit has just gone berserk. Heat of battle, berserk. Right. He has to charge the nearest enemy unit, which of course is that tank. He's spent 1, 2, 3, 4. I think he's used up all his movement here. Let's just. When he goes berserk, he has his movement factors go up from 4 to 8. So he's now spent 4 points. He would normally have stopped there and advanced in. Instead of that, he's just simply going to charge into that hex, like so. There's a thing there, and this guy has now fired. Right, he's in that hex. Now, actually, there is residual in there because if you remember I have not been placing it. I've not been very good, but the coaxial machine gun fired 9. So there's a 4 in that. So he has got to take that. Now he is moving in the open, non-assault moving, and we have got a 4 IFT attack of double 1. Okay. So that's a K2. Now this is where him being a berserk is interesting. So a K2. So obviously he goes down to a half squad. He then has to take the 2 morale check, but berserkers have a morale of 10. So 5, 6, 7, 8. That actually, and he's immune to pin. So in fact he's past that. So he's now in that hex, and he will be able to attempt to attack that tank in the close combat phase. Okay, now where are we going with this tank, and indeed with all the infantry underneath it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so they're going to do. They're going to take the CX off. Okay, so the CX obviously comes off at the end. At the beginning of its movement, or at the end, or after it prep fires, and it means that they can't CX again this turn. We're going to do armoured assault. This tank is going to start for 1. It is going to turn for 2. They're all going to move to here for 3, 4. Not quite sure what happened there. So I'm counting the tanks. So it's 4 to there. The infantry, it's 1, 2, 3, bypass 4, 5, 6. That's where they're going, and they're able to do that because they got the leader with them. So the tank has spent 4. I'm going to count the tank. 5, 6. Bypass W3 for 8, 9. Now he can't fire yet because he's within 2 hexes of this. Okay, we're now going to move into here for 7. And we are going to. They're not going to go any further. And the tank is going to stop there. Okay. Okay, so I think everything's moved. So final fire. Well, this tank can't fire. Oh, sorry. This guy should have taken a shot as they were moving along from there. So he'll final fire. So he's would normally be a 3. So he's only a 1 now. and it's going to be a 1 flat because they're not moving in the open because they're with the tank. But they are non-assault moving, but they're protected by the tank, so it cancels out. So it's a one flat. On the IFT, that will be no effect. Okay, well, defensive fire. This tank has already used up all its fire options. These guys haven't, but they got no targets. Kind of the same. This tank here can fire, and possibly should consider firing the. Yeah, okay, so they're going to fire. They can't fire the bow machine gun, but they can fire the coaxial against those infantry. It's 4 point blank range, so it's doubled. I say it's 4. It's 5, doubled to 10. It's halved because they're in motion, so it's a 4 plus 2 because I don't know. So if this is the one with wall advantage, isn't it? Oh gosh. Okay. But they are hiding behind a tank that has stopped, so they get +1 for the tank. So it's a 4 plus 1. 5, 6 on a 4 is a normal morale check. So the leader passes, and the squad probably pins. It's a normal morale check, a 9. So yeah, they've pinned. So they're not going to be. Let's take that off. That's obviously not concealed. They're not going to be moving in for a close combat, which was actually the plan. So that was quite effective. Is it worth firing it's probably not worth firing while the vehicle itself is in motion. It's very, very difficult to hit when you're in motion. Okay, so that's the end of defensive fire. It's now advancing fire. Okay, let's get rid of defensive fire markers and residual. Advancing fire. So this tank here didn't fire, so it's going to fire now. So we're advancing fire at firing this, and let's work out. Let's work this out. I obviously need to get the table back. It's slightly difficult to use the setup I have here. Okay, so we're within 6 hexes, so it's 10 to hit. We have got target based. Okay, so well, it has moved, which is going to be +2. It has a fast turret traverse, which is a +2. It is not buttoned up, but the target it's firing at is moving. That's another +2, so it's +6 to hit. Okay, to hit. That's going to be a miss. Now, had I gone for APCR, it's a bit of a mistake that I didn't. That would have been a miss, but we wouldn't have had APCR, and we would have another shot now. However, we do have that. This unit here is going to try for a similar type of shot. It's going to declare APCR. Now he is buttoned up, and the target is the other side of a wall. So I'm just going to roll it because I don't think it's a very good chance of a hit. That will be a miss. But we have another acquisition. So this tank now has a number of kind of acquisition counters on it. That's it, I think. Yeah, that's it. So now we're moving to the route phase. We can get rid of movement markers. We can get rid of the prep fire markers. Right, the only unit that's broken is this one here. He clearly needs to route. It's a little bit difficult here because he has to route to the nearest building, which would be this one, or this one, or one of these three. So there's like quite a few kind of like choices really. So he gets to kind of choose. He can't move towards a known enemy unit. He can see this guy, so he can't move towards that building. So he can't move there. Could potentially move to here, but then he would risk interdiction here. So this unit here would be able to interdict him. And okay, but could he go this way? Okay, so what I'm a little bit unsure about rules-wise is this unit can't interdict because it's in motion. this unit, I'm kind of assuming can't interdict because he's essentially in close combat, isn't he? So I'm going to take the view that he can go to there and then to there. Okay, so that's the route phase. Next phase, advancing forward, advances. Okay, right. Okay, he's already in. Now he can't get in the tank. He can get into the tank in the movement phase, or we can just use him as some extra infantry. So let's do that. Let's move him for some extra infantry. Actually, do you know what? No, let's leave him there because he can get back into the tank and do some good. Now, I was really hoping to advance this lot into there and show you a little bit of close combat against tanks, but I think the Hungarians are going to be doing some of that anyway. Leaders, however, can go into close combat on their own, but we're not going to do that. I don't think that's very sensible. A leader on his own is going to struggle to take out a tank, but a leader with a squad has got a reasonable chance. So let's see what happens then in terms of the close combat. So there's no advances, everything is staying where it is. We have a close combat here. Okay, so when infantry are fighting in close combat against vehicles, the infantry get to go first. There is sort of basically, think of it as a sort of automatic kind of ambush. Really, you're in a tank and you're trying to see that there's men running around all over the place. This unit here is a half squad. He has a CCV, which is a close combat value of 3. Squads have a CCV of 5. Basically, I have to roll a 3 or less to destroy this tank. Now, there are potentially modifiers. I don't believe there are any modifiers here. If I just go through what they are. So again, yeah, versus unarmed vehicle. This isn't an unarmored vehicle. This isn't unarmored. Versus a motion vehicle. It's not in motion. There's no escorting personnel. It's not open top, which would make it much more vulnerable. It's not crew it is crew exposed. Okay, so that's a -1. It's not immobile. The Russians don't have anti-tank magnetic mines. Okay, so essentially we get to do some damage. The kill number basically is 4, 3, and a -1 because the tank is currently open topped. So we have rolled a 6. Obviously, that's not going to make any difference here. Okay, so they are now. Let's flip that to melee. Now, I think infantry can't hold tanks in close combat, so this vehicle will be able to start up and move. But I don't believe it can fire out of that hex because there are enemy units in there. And that, I believe, I'm going to tidy this all up a little bit, I believe that is the end of the Allied turn. We've had the close combat, now into route. It's going to be the Axis turn. So it's now the Hungarian turn. 2. Got the roll for the wind. There's no change. Let's look at rallies. So there are no rally actions for the Hungarians. Of course, we can't try to rally that because it's not the Allied turn. We're going to go to prep fire. Okay, so this guy's locked in close combat really, so he can't really he can't fire at anything. He could fire at the crew, but I think what we're really thinking about here is trying to get into close combat with some of these tanks. Specifically, this tank looks kind of vulnerable to an attack. So if these guys are able to find themselves to be into B3, so okay, essentially we're not taking any prep fire shots. This tank is going to try to move. Let's go to the. Actually, well, we'll take 1 prep fire shot. Oh, pins have come off as well. 6 up 2. risking that. Okay, so he's going to take a prep fire shot. 2 plus 2 into there. The tank is not going to be affected by it. No effect. Okay, right. Now go to movement. Thought it was worth taking that shot because it's, normally when you fire into melees you affect your units as well as the opponent's units, but it's kind of like, I just want to kind of like demonstrate how obviously the tank is invulnerable, so there's no real problem with firing into melee like that. Movement. Okay, this guy is going to go 1, and here he's going to become visible, and they are going to go 3 into here. Now we've got 2 squads potentially that can move into close combat with this tank here. This guy here also, I think we're just going to simply assault move him to here. He's preventing this sort of like instant death sort of situation where if a Russian unit manages to get into this building becomes all there, so he's just hanging out in there, just a half squad. But he can, if a tank tries to go down this road or down this road, he has got a small but not completely dismissible chance to take it out with street fighting. Okay, this is the only other unit. This unit needs to move, and of course this unit can move. So this one is going to move first, and it's going to move into this hex, losing wall advantage. That's following from this tank here, and it can follow. Well, this tank can follow as well. So it's moving there for 2. Right, this is when this tank is going to fire. It's definitely into the rear. It's still within 6 hexes, so it's a 10 to hit. It's in motion, which means that it's +2. And it has to be a turret hit because it's behind the wall now. So it's 8 to hit, but it's got to be white over red hit in the head. So this is a turret hit. Okay, so this is normal anti-tank, which with a 76L, I can't remember. Was it like third? I think it's 13, isn't it? I'm going to have to get the table out. Okay. Ordnance vehicle to kill 76 is 13. Well, we're two hexes away, so we don't get the +1 bonus. So 13 to kill. The rear armour on this it's in the turret. No, it's a superior turret. So let's have. So I think the superior turret is going to go back. Basically, it's going to go up to a 4, but it's in the rear, so it goes down 1. So in fact, it's a 3. So it's a 13 plus 3 to hit. Oops, I should have been to kill. 8, 9, 10, 11. It's lower than, so this tank is destroyed. If we have a look on the back, the crew survival number is a 6. They don't survive, so we can wreck that vehicle. Now, interestingly, if this tank is destroyed, that's the end of the game. So this tank needs to get somewhere safer. I think that's my key takeout here. So it's going to start for 1, and it is going to button up, and it can do that as 1 movement. Otherwise, the people could perhaps fire at it. Infantry could have been firing at it. However, he can do a reaction shot to that movement. If it stayed where it was, he couldn't, but he can react to that. Now, the vehicle hasn't started yet, so currently it's going to be it's a 3, isn't it, to kill. Close combat. No, okay, so he's in motion now. 1 goes to there for 3. This tank can't fire at him. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, at this point this tank is going to fire. Okay, the turret covered arc will have to turn clockwise. We'll have to do a line of sight check. It's been declared, so we've taken the shot. It's obviously absolutely clear, but it had to turn the turret covered arc. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 10 to hit, plus 2 because it had to turn the turret, plus 2 because this tank is in motion. So it's plus 4 to hit. 4, that's a hit. So we know it's. So let's just see where it goes in. But I think it's a side hit, and it was in the hull. So it's a 3 in the hull, 13 to kill. 7 plus 3 is less than 13, so we've got to go for the crew survival, and they don't survive, and that tank is destroyed. Now, I believe at that point that the Russians have won, because Russians win at game end if there are no mobile Hungarian AFVs remain on board. So there we are at the end of in the Hungarian turn. The Russians have won. I might just play it out a little bit because I quite like to see how some of this close combat works out. There's no other movement. Defensive fire from the Russians. They can't really fire at these guys. This wall is in the way. All of this could come off. It's best to keep the board a little bit tidy. Okay, so as they are crew exposed, these guys can fire at them. The +2, when a crew explodes, you get +2 protection from the tank. So we've got 3, 4, 5, 6 in advancing fire now, aren't we? So we've got 6 halved and doubled because we're close. We're adjacent, so it's doubled. Halved because it's advancing fire phase. It's a 6 + 1. 7, 8. 8 on a 6 is a pin task check. They take that task check. Task check 6, 7. They pass it. Okay, we get rid of the prep fire markers, and we are going to move to the route phase. That's come off, by the way. That should have come off before. Advances. Okay, this guy here is going to try and move into close combat. Now, to do that, he has to take we call it a patsy. I can't remember what it stands for. Basically, it's a pin task check because it's a bit scary moving adjacent to an enemy tank. Okay, it's basically a morale check. And he fails it, so he can't move in. This unit here also, now leaders can do it automatically, and this leader is going to try to modify his patsy. He fails as well, so they don't get in. Okay, had they got in, these guys had something like a reasonable chance of taking out that tank. The squad CCV is 5. There'd be another -1 for the. So there'd be another. The leader adds 1, so it would have been a total CCV of 6, and the leader subtracts 1 as well, and the tank is crew exposed, which makes them even more vulnerable. So that would be a 5, 6, 7, something like an 8 or something like that, and they could have taken this tank out, but they had to pass the patsy, and they failed it. The leader could go in on his own, and his CCV is 2. He doesn't get the modifier for the leadership modifier, but the vehicle is crew exposed, so he could take it out on a 3 on his own, but didn't. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I hope that people have enjoyed this, and I hope that, even more, I hope you got something out of it. Feel free to post questions at the end, as well as comments about how this could be more useful in the future. And of course, everybody makes mistakes and they play ASL, so please point out the ones that I made in this scenario. Okay, take care all. Bye bye.